Hello, everybody. We are live. 0 viewers currently, so we'll maybe wait till a few more people join.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. People are joining now. We're just going to wait a minute or two just to give people a chance to join on. Right, so welcome everyone. My name's Hattie. I'm a vet, and we're joined tonight by Gemma Hodson, who I'm very interested to hear speak on her topic tonight. Gemma is a canine behaviour practitioner and canine myofunction and rehabilitation therapist. And tonight we'll be discussing how conformation, so kind of the way a dog is put together and essentially the structure of their bones and muscles and joints, and how that can affect comfort levels and link to potential pain. So it'll be an interesting topic. Gemma's a great person to speak to. She has worked for years and years in and around this topic. So it will be a great talk. I'd just like to say thank you very much to our sponsor for tonight, which is Big Barker Beds. I'm just going to put their video up, which is clinically proven beds to help and assist with orthopedic pain, is a great option for our arthritic dogs. So thank you very much to those guys for their sponsorship. So we will start with a little introduction of Gemma. So Gemma's worked for more than 20 years within the industry, looking at how pain can affect movement in various animals, including horses, and also loads and loads of work with dogs. She practices massage and rehabilitation and works with dog owners and other canine professionals like trainers and behaviourists to analyse canine behaviour, and undertakes dynamic dog assessments. So looking at all sorts of aspects of movement, behaviour, gait, kind of how they perform their day-to-day activities, and then how this may link to pain and how we can help improve things for them. Is that a fair summary, Gemma? Anything?
Yeah, that's the best one I've had so far. Yeah. Yeah, so I basically work with other trainers and behaviourists primarily to kind of teach them what I know about assessing movement in kind of various guises, so not just gait analysis. We look at every single possible way that a dog moves, like going up and down stairs, things like that. All these weird and wonderful things that a dog might do through its daily life, basically. We will analyse it and basically see how they're coping with their comfort levels. So, and then we put it into this fancy report that gets sent to the caregiver's beautiful vet, so that they can make a more informed diagnosis and actually see the dog in their home environment, really, because we know that quite often dogs, when they go to the vet, they can be either really excited or shut down, or kind of you don't get to see sometimes the full picture of maybe what's going on for a particular dog. So the kind of the whole process really kind of helps to get to the bottom of things for people's problematic pooches, basically.
Yeah, that sounds super interesting and really great that you kind of do your thorough assessment kind of outside of a veterinary setting and kind of get the dog nice and relaxed, and you can get a kind of true picture of what's going on, and then share that, you know, with owners, behaviourists, vets, and you know, everyone then can benefit from that information and from that report. So very, very cool. So tonight then we're going to be kind of specifically focusing a bit more on how conformation can affect gait and link to pain. So it's clear, you know, if you walk around any local park, that there's a huge variation in kind of shapes and sizes of dogs that you see around. both kind of, between different breeds and also within breeds. So Gemma, tell us about some of the most common conformation abnormalities you encounter in your day-to-day work.
Where do I start with that one? First of all, I should say kind of we shouldn't confuse conformation with posture. So conformation, as you quite rightly said at the beginning, is how the dog is put together. It's their overall structure and shape, from bones to where the muscles lay, shape of head, ears, eyes, and how the dog is put together in the dog factory, like I would like to call it. And posture is how the dog chooses to position themselves, and that could be purely for comfort or to kind of make themselves feel more comfortable kind of in day-to-day stuff, whether that's standing and drinking or eating out of a bowl or lying down or just sitting or what have you. But for me, the conformational things that I see a lot of, so we have a lot of crooked fronts. So, these, it's called fiddle front, Queen Anne legs. I think it's also termed as angular limb deformities in its most severe form. So that's with the front limbs. And then going on in the back end is cow-hocks for me. So that's where the dog, when you view it directly from behind, makes this hourglass figure. So the toes and the knees point outwards and the hocks point inwards together. And these dogs will move differently to compensate for those conformation abnormalities, and they might be subtle. They're not subtle to me, or any of my guys that I've had on the course. However, but to the normal pet parent, they might think, that's just the way that their dog is. But yeah, I mean, we can definitely tell by the way a dog is put together actually how they might move and how that might affect them. So it's really interesting. There's not one dog that I see when I go out my front door now that I'm not seeing something and I'm like, oh my god, this is this is scary. There's so many broken dogs out there. So that people are kind of unaware that their dog is struggling.
Yeah, so it's hard to see them as just a dog. Sometimes you've always got your analysing brain on.
Once you start seeing stuff, you can't unsee it. My students will often kind of get halfway through the course and start to say, well, I got beeped at the lights because I was too busy staring at the dog that was being walked down the road and going, oh, that conformation or that movement isn't quite right. So yeah, once you see it, you can't unsee it for sure.
Yeah. Do you find that most of the sort of owners you work with are quite receptive when you're kind of identifying these abnormalities?
So I tend to attract owners that have either been recommended that they come to see me or to see one of my guys. So they're already kind of preloaded with the fact that potentially there could be something a little wonky with their dog, maybe isn't quite right, whether it's movement, or conformation. But I think for the large part, if someone just came to me for behaviour, and then I started talking about maybe discomfort and that, sometimes you get a little bit of pushback from the owners because, no one likes to be told that they might have missed something in their dog. It's hard to hear. Everybody wants to believe that, they know their dog inside and out, and they do. But not everybody looks at a dog in the same way. A lot of the multidisciplinary team within the industry do. So it can be hard to hear sometimes, but I'm lucky that I attract the kind of person who's already got an inkling something might not be quite right.
Yeah, that's good. You kind of work with that proactive kind of population of owners that, probably most of the listeners tonight, fall into that category. The fact that, it's great to see so many people that increasingly kind of take an interest and want to observe and want to kind of connect with their dog and help their dog as best they can. So yes, to be encouraged more.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, education is key. I mean, I say quite a lot, it doesn't necessarily have to come from vets. It also needs to come from trainers and behaviourists and breeders. Good breeders obviously will do that anyway. But, you know, we all have a responsibility, I think. It's not one person's fault, but it's kind of everybody's responsibility to kind of be better informed. With the links between pain and behaviour, for sure, but you know, just observing your dog and knowing which end from which, really, and kind of how these things can, you know, different things like conformation can affect a dog, basically.
Yeah, you kind of touched there on sort of, yeah, lots of people having a role in education, and one of the ones you mentioned was breeders. I think being a vet, we see, or I see, you know, new owners come in with their puppies, some of which obviously have been like really well informed from breeders and really proactive, very responsible breeders, which is really great. And then some not so much. And, you know, unfortunately, you can identify various conformation issues in some puppies quite early on. Do you think that, or what do you think we could potentially do, we being behaviourists, trainers, vets, and you know, members of the public, kind of to kind of improve this issue?
That's a tough one. That's a tough one, really. I mean, there's so many wide varieties of breeds out there, you know, and that's what makes dogs so interesting. You know, nobody loves kind of every single dog. Everyone's got a favorite breed, if it is what I'm getting at. Sorry, I've got a fly buzzing around me. And I think you need to know the breed that you have in front of you. And I think you need to look for good examples of that breed, so that when you do go and work with that particular breed, or you have one walk through your door, you can actually start to assess it a little bit more effectively. I think, you know, look for the good examples, so that when one comes in, I mean, we can touch on different breeds if you want to. I mean, some of the more unhealthy ones within the canine world, you know, we can look at German Shepherds, we can look at flat-faced breeds if you want to, and you know, your Dachshunds, and you know, long body, short legs, you know, and all these dogs have predispositions, you know, of their own within each breed. But there are really good examples of those breeds, and there's some shocking ones, and it's knowing the difference between the two. And I hear quite a lot that, you know, particular things within certain types of breeds are normal for the breed, and really and truly, they're common. They're not normal. They're common. They're seen a lot. And I think we're so used to seeing specific, maybe conformational defects or movement defects, that we just could think that they're normal now. And in actual fact, they really aren't. And if we look at these things kind of early on and support the dogs better, support the owners better, you know, we could actually maybe stave off arthritis for longer, or stop it from developing quite as quickly as it does with some conditions, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So that kind of early recognition, and then I suppose, you know, it's not to say that these dogs are going to need immediate lifelong medication necessarily, but, you know, more the kind of lifestyle changes and exercise modification to kind of allow their joints to keep going for longer and maintain that cartilage, and hopefully not wreck their joints quite so quickly.
Exactly. I mean, your you know, general dog owner, they might just go and get, you know, a puppy that might not even matter to them what breed it is. They just want a dog, and they don't look at conformation before they then might start the dog doing agility, you know. And I think when you've got a dog that's got their angular limb deformity, and it comes in varying degrees, like I said, it could be subtle, moderate, severe, and if you don't know that that's not normal, and you then start a dog on agility, you're actually kind of progressing the potential for injury. You know, you're leaving that dog wide open to strains, sprains, increased joint pressures, micro cartilage traumas, and things like that. And I think it's you then end up with a dog with a 4 years old that they can barely move because the conformation hasn't been taken into account, and then you've got a dog that's been jumping around like a loon, really and truly on limbs that can't cope with the job they're being asked to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I've just seen a comment from Hannah saying the classic terriers are supposed to hop.
Oh,
do you want to speak a bit more about that, Gemma, and maybe explain about where that comment might come from and what is actually going on in that?
So this grinds my potato quite a lot, I have to say. So many times I've heard it's normal for terriers to do that. It's the Frenchy skip. French bulldogs do it, and it's. So I read an article, actually, I think it is Canine Osteopathic Health online, and there's evidence to suggest that it can be, breed is heavily influenced with this condition because I think we're talking luxating patella here. Am I right, Hattie? So obviously I can't diagnose, but that is quite typical for a luxating patella. It's very, very common in small dogs. As I said, common, not normal. Common in smaller breeds. Less likely to happen in something such as your beautiful greyhounds that I saw earlier. However, if you've got a Pomeranian, they're more likely to have it, but it's more prone in females. And they've narrowed it down to the width of the pelvis. And apparently the wider the pelvis, and of course, obviously females need a wider pelvis, obviously for birthing, can change, basically set off a cascade of changes in muscles and how the actual patella ligament then lines up, and it starts it to immediately luxate, basically. So yeah, it's not normal. So a luxation is basically a dislocation of form, and I don't think you can say a dislocation is normal. Can you, Hattie?
No. And I've got a good friend who sadly luxates her own kneecap by accident from time to time, and she says like every time it happens she is in agony and she swears a lot. So don't blame our dog companions for sometimes maybe swearing when it happens to them.
Absolutely. And that kind of like little kind of skip up that they do is them trying to right the patella back into its natural, where it should be aligned into. And yeah, by saying, it shouldn't cause them any pain, we don't actually know, unless we've got Dr. Dolittle, powers where we can understand bark all of a sudden. We don't 100% know. So, maybe, we should just err on the side of caution and kind of like, treat pain first and then see, support with other therapies. Physiotherapy, hydrotherapy are obviously two go-to ones that I would definitely get on board for a luxating patella. But yeah, it's not normal.
No, and it will lead to arthritis if it keeps happening.
And it doesn't matter how mild the luxation is as well. It's going to be rubbing.
Yeah, every time it's moving around, popping in and out, it's grinding down that cartilage a little bit more.
It just hearing about actually what happens with a luxation of any kind, it makes you wince as a human. You're like, why do we think, why is it it's not going to hurt the dog the same? Yes, it blinking well it is.
Yeah, and they're quite amazing really how they adapt. They'll just be going along and just do that little bunny hop, like, and each time they're doing that, they're probably thinking, oh god, like it's happened again.
Exactly. And if to a dog owner that's not in the know, that's really cute, my dog skips. Oh, he's always done it from birth. That's another thing. If he's always done it, doesn't make that right either.
Yeah, absolutely. another key joint, I suppose, that where we often see arthritis would be hips, and obviously a big topic in that kind of world is hip dysplasia. I assume that that's something, kind of hip abnormalities is something that you come across quite a lot, which of course, having hip dysplasia is a conformation abnormality. So the hip joint hasn't formed properly, basically. So what sort of tests do you do to kind of look for abnormalities in hip function?
So for me, I'm looking to see whether that dog can use its hind limbs normally. Okay, I'm looking for a normal range of motion. So the dog can fully protract, which is to bring their limb forward, and retract, which is to extend their limb out behind. I'm looking to make sure that they're not doing this weird kind of waddling gait, which we know is circumduction, where the dog is struggling to actually use that ball and socket joint, the coxofemoral joint, properly, because it's sore. If there's depending on kind of like where the issue lies, whether it's the femoral head or whether it's the actual acetabulum or the cup that the ball fits into, the dog might move slightly differently. You might see a lot of hind end sway from side to side because the dog's basically going, well, if I use a lot of energy to kind of like wiggle along, that's going to propel me forwards, but the dog's going to get more tired when they're doing that. And you might see a lot of excessive tail movement with that, maybe one side more than the other, because generally there tends to be the hip is worse on one side than the other due to the way that the dog loads. So you might see a tail kind of over onto the worst side. So yeah, we're looking at a lot of things, and we're looking at the spine as well. So the issue never just affects where the problem is found. So you'll never just have the problem in the joint, you'll have the problem lower down. So there might be a little bit of stifle or hot weakness going on, but you also might have overworking of the spine. So maybe the lumbosacral or the thoracolumbar joint might be overworking because the dog's having to overcompensate to get around the fact that they've got painful, dodgy hips at the back. You might have a lot of nail scuffing. I'll be looking at the nail wear, the pad wear on the bottom of the feet, even the fur wear as well. Sometimes you can see the weight-bearing toes are like 3 and 4, so the 2 middle toes. So you might see that the hair is longer on the outside, or slightly kind of poking through underneath. You might see that the nails are shorter in the middle than they are on the outside, or right down to the quick as well. So some dogs don't actually manage to clear the floor when they're moving along as well. So you might see some scuffing on top, and worn hair, and maybe even where the hair's missing with some dogs where it's really, really bad. So there's no specific test that I do, because obviously the diagnosing is down to you as the vet. We can only give observations, but there are some classic things that we see. One of them is frog dog as well, and the dog's ability to kind of like, can they fully extend out behind when they lie down, or do they have to lie in certain positions to make themselves more comfortable as well? So we look at so many things.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it, how like an abnormality in one joint or two joints can affect so many different parts of the dog, and there's so many sort of telltale signs, actually, like you were saying at the beginning. Once you start looking and noticing learning, there's a lot we can learn just from these kind of little things and the knock-on effects of a conformation abnormality.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing is that when a dog is a puppy, what we see might be really, really small, but that has the potential to worsen as they age. So, a dog might only have a really mild hip dysplasia, but we know that can worsen through age. And that applies to any conformational abnormality, no matter how small. It might not be hurting them now, but it might do in 4 years' time. So should we leave it until it gets to the point where the dog is in chronic pain, or should we put supportive processes in place, whether it's just the dog start seeing a physiotherapist a couple of times a year, and the owner gets specific exercises to help that dog going forward. And then obviously if they go back to that physiotherapist a couple of times a year, they can reassess, you know, and help the vet to kind of help that dog and that client a little bit more and change the way that they do things. Or, you know, they might need, you know, maybe longer term, more intensive therapy to actually help support them. I've worked with dogs that have got severe reactivity, aggression issues to life, basically, and the dogs, you know, had to have an intensive course of hydrotherapy to help build muscle, you know, improve strength, improve tone, lessen pain, because hydro is brilliant as a pain non-medication pain relieving modality. And you know, that dog now has to go at least once every 3 weeks for the rest of its life, just to keep on top of things. You know, and there's varying degrees of what we can do, but why not support? Why leave it till it's, you know, a real chronic problem for that dog? We win for ourselves.
Yeah, a great example actually of kind of what you were just saying about sort of being proactive and like acting when the dog is young. I can see that Sheila, thank you, you've commented saying that your Cavalier had a luxating patella operation at 11 months old, so it was obviously kind of recognized and addressed early on, and at the same time was diagnosed with mild hip dysplasia. So that was a helpful thing to know at the same time and go, okay, like you can know about it and recognize it and put measures in place early on. So yeah, that's a sort of, yeah, like you were saying, really great example of
perfect
addressing things. And I guess, Sheila, that you're well, you say, you know, careful with her exercise, and you're obviously aware and putting measures in place with the U move and things like that. So yeah, it's I guess a good real life example of what we're discussing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important as well, because we wouldn't want to suffer. So, you know, and I know some dogs be quite stoic with things like this. And yeah, I mean, we you know, if we have an animal, it's our duty to make sure that they don't suffer along, you know, with us, basically. We have a voice, they don't. So
yeah. Another I think you kind of touched on it earlier, was the kind of long-backed, short-legged dogs. So like a Dachshund would be a classic example, where the sort of fancy word for it is chondrodysplastic, where they, you know, essentially it's like they've got very short, stumpy bones and a long body. So can you talk me through some of the things you'd be looking for when assessing a breed like that?
Yeah, so, you know, it's effectively dwarfism is what we're talking about. We've selectively bred for the gene for dwarfism in dogs. Aren't humans amazing? Not. We've done that to those dogs. So, you know, what we've done is shorten the legs. The body and the head are normal size. We've shortened the legs. And as a result, you know, we get the bowing of the front legs. We get angular limb or foot deformities in these breeds. We get some weird things going on at the backs. We get quite long hocks or rear pasterns of the dogs, and with some Dachshunds it makes them look like if they were a human they'd be wearing flippers, and they're kind of it's not nice to watch. They really struggle to kind of use these little legs that have got unusually large aspects to them, if that makes sense. But obviously with dogs as well, with long backs and short little legs, they are prone to having back issues. I see a lot of overworking of the thoracolumbar junction, T13, L1. I see a lot of tension down the muscles either side. There's IVDD, intervertebral disc disease, and herniated discs that these guys suffer with. And, you know, these little, they look roughy tufty kind of dogs, and, you know, they do throw themselves around quite a bit. However, we should be limiting that and stopping them, and because what that does when they're bouncing around on short little legs. Concussion goes up those legs and along the back. And guess what? That's what predisposes them to having IVDD and the weaknesses and the herniated disc in the back. And we also see it in French bulldogs as well, the smaller dogs that get it, basically. So you might see roaching of the back, especially from along the lumbar area, with a lot of these dogs, and they just look uncomfortable. They look uncomfortable, and they look quite sad. Low head position, as well as they're shifting weight forwards, and these little dogs don't move normally anyway. I know each breed has its own way of moving, but they should all be striving for some semblance of straightness. And these dogs can't move straight. They can't. They're capable, but because their bodies aren't built to allow them to do that.
Yeah, it's kind of, they're up against it, aren't they, when they, like, their anatomy doesn't quite allow them to move in a normal way.
No.
I like to think of with the intervertebral disc disease of like the intervertebral discs are little jam donuts sitting between the vertebrae, and you can imagine with their long spines and all that concussion going up the legs that it's constantly squeezing those jam donuts, and that squeezing will hurt, as will if they go pop and the jam comes out, which is when you tend to get the kind of paresis and paralysis and sometimes need for surgery. But obviously we want to be addressing them before they get to that point, and adapting their lifestyle. Like you say, they're going to want to run around and be little rascals and the funny little characters that they are, but we need to step in and kind of go, whoa guys.
we do and but like I say, us humans, we've done it. We're the guilty party. We've bred for things that we like the look of, or exaggerated the aesthetics of a dog past the point of what they were bred to originally do. Bulldog, case in point. And they can't do the things that they used to do even 20 years ago, because just their bodies aren't built for it anymore, unfortunately.
I guess you've mentioned there about the sort of bulldogs and flat-faced breeds, which is another one where from a conformation perspective, they tend to have lots of issues, like you say, like spinal issues, luxating patellas, angular limb deformities. We've bred them. I heard that it possibly is because they have like a human-like kind of large eyes, flat face, like a baby, and there's something within us as humans that's like, oh, but they're so cute, which they are. But it's obviously not really fair on the dogs to the extreme that some of them are.
Not at all. And I'm guilty. I have one. I didn't look at him and go, oh, he looks like I'm not a fan of children. They make me itch, just so you know. It wasn't that aspect for me. But I have one. I have an English bulldog. He's 9 now, and we were having a chat about him before I come on. Thankfully, he doesn't have the conformation issues that I see a lot of his breed and his kind of like sister and brother breeds, if you like, the Frenchies have. He has extreme allergies, but he's 9 and he's a cracking dog. And I used to be able to walk him for hours, and he used to outrun any spaniel that I had. I mean, he was on the go the whole time, bless him. But these breeds, these brachycephalic breeds, I mean, where do we draw the line with those? Again, us humans have done that to them. And I have heard of people purchasing puppies, and before, like French bulldogs especially, and before they even pick the puppy up, they've got that puppy booked in for BOAS surgery. So we're buying puppies that we know are going to struggle to breathe and have normal.
They literally have to have surgery in order to be able to live a vaguely reasonable quality of life. it's not okay.
No, it's not. And I've heard stories of French bulldogs literally being opened up from kind of chest down and having their insides rearranged because they're not, they're just not where, you know, things aren't where they should be. And it's, and don't get me wrong, what I want to say is that it's not all breeders are like that. You know, there's some flipping brilliant breeders out there, but there's a lot of shocking ones out there as well, which I think we were discussing that documentary that was on BBC last night with the XL bullies. You know, and there was some extreme conformational problems going on with those dogs, and you know, yes, they're extreme, but there's also some that are mild, which are causing the dogs equal amounts of pain out there as well. So it's, you know, it's finding a right breeder that knows their stuff and that they're trying to improve the breed. But I don't think that the English bulldog is savable, if that's a word.
Yeah. I wonder if any of our listeners tonight, if they had seen the Panorama documentary that aired yesterday, comment if you watched it, or if you had any thoughts or any other comments or questions around sort of anything we've been speaking about tonight. But yeah, for me, it was like you say, those conformational abnormalities. Those dogs, some of them could hardly walk, let alone breathe. And I think the sort of, whilst we're kind of on the topic of conformation, you know, those issues with or conformational abnormalities with their respiratory tract as well, then has a knock-on effect on their posture. Like we were discussing, you know, conformation does not equal posture, but they link very closely. And those dogs that are having to stand with their elbows adducted, so their elbows turned out and kind of head up, and they can't quite relax and lie in a normal way because they're always having to kind of keep their airway open, and you know, it must strain their neck and their back, and yeah, and also their necks are so thick. I mean, my dog Ron, I mean, his neck is wider than his head. When I call his name, he literally has to go, what? He can't turn his head, you know, flex his neck like a normal dog. But you know, when you have these XL bullies that are built for like plus muscle, they can't move. They're, you know, they're restricted in the neck, they're restricted in the shoulders, most of the back, probably half the spine, certainly the cervical and the thoracic spine. They just can't move. And then on top of that, they've got knackered legs, you know, front and back, you know, I mean, the XL bullies were a classic example of angular limb deformity going on there. And bull breeds are at the top of the list for hip dysplasia. So we know that there's going to be stuff going on behind. So it doesn't matter which end you go to, you know, none of those dogs looked healthy at all on that documentary. And it was really quite sad to see that they got specific breeders were getting away with doing that for as long as they did. Yeah, it's sad because it's you know, it's a massive welfare issue for the dogs, and you feel like saying to people, actually, if you were to go and buy a little crossbreed Heinz 57 mutt, you know, you'd not only pay less for that, it would be healthy and cost you less, and it would live a great quality of life. And
most likely. But I think you've hit the nail on the head there. It's supply and demand. So if people are demanding these breeds, someone's going to want to earn that to supply them. It's easy money.
Yeah. We're probably slightly preaching to the converted here, because, you know, again, you guys listening in tonight, I'm sure, you know, proactive people who are you know, care about animal welfare to be even listening. So yeah, we'll probably move on from the kind of XL bully and brachycephalic irresponsible breeding issue.
Absolutely. I mean, if you want to go on to kind of crossbreeds, you know, this isn't, conformation doesn't apply to the purebred dogs. It also applies to crossbreeds. When you don't know the lineage of your dog, you can kind of go for type. We see a lot of little Greek rescues coming over that have short legs and long bodies, you know, and things like that. So you know, you can kind of put them into type categories as well with conformation. And you know, when you look at a dog from the front, we want straight columns of support. We want those limbs to be as straight as possible, toes pointing forwards, elbows kind of not like jammed in, but you know, elbows nice and in and against the body, you know. And when we look at the dog from directly behind, we want to see those straight columns of support again. We want to see parallel hocks. You know, any deviation off of straightness when you're looking directly in front and directly behind, you might want to put a question mark over what you're seeing. You know, make sure the dog is standing four square first. Obviously, like a bit like stood like a coffee table, leg in each corner. That's what we want to see when we're assessing conformation. A bit like how you see people in show rings maybe standing their dogs. I'm not asking you to manhandle your dog, but you get the idea of how the dog needs to be posturally stood. You know, and just have a look. And conformation, depending on the conformational fault, should we call it, can progress over time. You know, and we can bring fitness and the dog's you know, stature into this. When I say stature, I'm talking about maybe their build, their whether they're, you know, fat, thin, overweight. You know, that's all going to add to maybe the condition rapidly progressing or not as well. So, you know, these dogs with fiddle front or angular limb deformity, if they're overweight, guess what you're going to do? You're going to be putting more weight on already struggling joints, and that is then going to speed up the likelihood or the progression of arthritis.
Absolutely, yeah. So kind of you know, obesity isn't really isn't a conformation issue, but it's something that we have done to dogs, and a way that, you know, we've altered their posture and altered the loading on their joints. Yeah, so that's another, I know, talking about arthritis, that's like a key thing that we come back to time and time again is weight management, and the importance of that. And you did mention at the beginning that all breeds have their own kind of natural shape and size of kind of how they were made at the dog factory. And, you know, some of them do naturally carry a bit more weight and muscle, and, you know, that potentially can contribute to things. But I mean, do you find that obesity is, you know, would have a massive impact on pain and kind of joint issues that you encounter?
Absolutely. It's gonna make things worse, 10 times worse, 100 times worse. You know, the bigger the animal, the more weight that animal is carrying, the more it's going to impact on those joints and joint pressures. That means that they're going to further compensate for what's going on for them, which is going to cause further pain. It's going to cause compensatory effects. So then you start having things kind of go wrong on other areas of the body, you know, because they're having to stand, because they're having to move differently because of what was originally going on. So yeah, absolutely. And you know what? It makes it more difficult to treat when you're giving hands-on therapy and you're trying to get through layers of fat in order to get to sore, tight, tired muscles. It's hard work. It's really hard work. So, you know, you've got to take that into account. I mean, it must be difficult for you as a vet doing surgery if you've got to cut through loads and loads of layers of fat before you can actually get to where you need to be. You know, we're not helping our dogs here at all.
Yeah, fat's really slippery and oozy and makes everything be all like slimy and difficult. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Not good at all.
No. How do you think, or have you got any kind of tips for owners listening in? You know, if a vet or another professional such as yourself was to kind of bring up the fact that there was a conformation abnormality with their dog, kind of how we can work together and you know, help them through it, really, because I think occasionally, you know, like you say, owners don't want to think that they might have missed something in their dog, and it's not their fault that there's a conformation abnormality. But you know, I think we're all on the same team, and we want to kind of help owners to it's not a personal attack against their dog, saying, you know, X, Y, and Z is wrong with your dog, but it's just, yeah, helping people to understand what we can do to help. So have you got any kind of tips for the listeners, you know, if their vet or somebody else, other professional, kind of brought this up, or if they notice something themselves and were worried, kind of how to go about tackling that?
So I think you need to know, if you've got a purebred, I think you need to know your breed. Go and do the research, and like I said, look for good examples of the breed, and obviously compare that to your own dog. Speak to decent breeders that there are out there, and you know, if the vet or another professional bring it up, listen. You know, I'll start asking questions. You know, how severe is this anomaly? You know, how severe is this fault? How is it going to be affecting my dog? Is there anything I can do to support my dog better? You know, whether it's at home, kind of car, out on a walk. And you know what? The best people to do that are your multidisciplinary team. You start off with a vet, and then, you know, speak to veterinary physiotherapists, speak to canine fitness people. They're also really good, really knowledgeable as well. Massage therapists, hydrotherapists. You know, get a plan in place that you can adapt to suit your dog, and just make sure that you kind of do what's the best you possibly can for your dog, and that's all we can ask at the end of the day. You know, you might not be able to do, you know, loads and loads of sessions with a physio and things like that, but they can put you on the right path, you know, and you know, yeah, be better informed, do some research, I think is the best thing to do.
Yeah, cool. We've just had an interesting little story in from Maria about her nearly 11-year-old Labrador, who was advised that he may only have a 5-year lifespan originally, with hip and elbow dysplasia. Poor Max. And yeah, osteoarthritis probably in most of his joints now, struggling with pain relief at the moment. But he goes to the vet, physio, and pain clinic regularly. Yay for Max. And Maria says, is there anything other than a good breeder and well-scored parents that is advised when looking for a pup?
Yeah, so don't just stop at the first breeder you come to. It took me 9 months to find one for my bulldog, you know, that was breeding for healthy animals. So, you know, do research on your individual breeders. If you're going to go for even if you're going to go for like a Heinz 57, when I say Heinz 57, designer dogs, your cockapoos, and your diddly doos or your Yankee doodles or whatever they're called these days. You know, you've got to do your research on each breed. You need to know exactly what a good example of the breed looks like, and ones that don't. And don't just stop at the first breeder that you come to. And yeah, just do your research, get really well informed before you go and buy a puppy. Obviously there's a lot of rescue stuff out there as well. Go rescue a dog if anything. But you get breed rescues as well. So they're always good to go to as well. So yeah, but ensuring all the tests that are done, if you're going to go specifically to a breeder, you know, make sure you know exactly what tests are done for that breed. And make sure that, you know, both the parents have fulfilled all those tests.
Yeah, well, I think as well, like you can most of the time through interactions with a breeder kind of get an idea ethically where they're at and where their priorities lie. You know, do their priorities lie with pumping out maximum amounts of puppy for maximum profit, or kind of are they willing to speak to you in detail, and are they kind of proud to tell you about the health profiles of their dogs and you know, perhaps testing that they've had done, and show you examples of previous offspring photos, maybe even in person. They might, you know, still have some of their, you know, previous generations at their home. You know, are they keeping, you know, the older dogs once they finish breeding? Do they then bring them into their home as a, you know, let them live out their final, you know, old age years? And you can get quite a good feel. Yes, you know, occasionally people can be a bit deceptive. I think if you're quite careful and quite thorough, you can get a vibe as to kind of, you know, whether their priority is with the animal welfare, or perhaps there's more, you know, financial motives or whatever. So,
and speaking, I mean, when it was my dog Ron, you know, I got to see both parents. I got to see uncles, aunts, sisters. I got to see kind of cousins. Do you know what I mean? And my breeder was completely open and honest. I got invited to shows where I met, you know, people that have had their puppies before and things like that. I was put in touch with people that had puppies and they went to like pet homes rather than show homes and things like that. So I think if you have a question and your breeder is as transparent and as willing to answer every single question that you have, then I think you're on to kind of quite a winner with that one. If they seem quite guarded, or they're kind of reluctant to kind of let you see the ins and outs of their setup, you know, where these puppies are bred, how are they dealt with when the puppies are born, that kind of thing, what interactions they have with other with the rest of the family and things like that. I think if they're at all kind of like, no, well, we don't let people see that, I'd be saying, well, why? You know, you want a breeder to be kind of really open and honest with you about everything. I've asked to see pedigrees, past pedigrees, and I go rooting through hip scores and like grandparents, great grandparents. I'm really nosy, and luckily I was brought up in a showing world, if you like. So my parents bred Welsh Springers and Italian Spinoni, and they were really good. My mum, credit to her, she was a really good breeder. She made sure that she was breeding, you know, fit, function, you know, and they had good conformation and sound movement. And that I had that kind of ingrained in me. So, you know, don't just stop at parents, go grandparents, go great grandparents, have a look at what's kind of flagged up and the tests that they've had done as well.
Yeah, like you say, that kind of being thorough and transparent and letting you see all aspects of what they do is important, and yeah, is quite telling a lot of the time. We've had a few comments come in. Let me just read. So yeah, poor Maria thinks she may have just got unlucky with poor Max. But it sounds like you're giving him a really lovely old age, and he's done incredibly well.
He landed on his paws when he found the
yeah, absolutely. Good breeders should take back puppies if the home doesn't work out, should assess, including home visit, the suitability. Yeah, and that's the other thing. Does the breeder care that you're going to give the puppy a good home? That's a really good point as well, that it kind of works both ways. And a good breeder that genuinely cares about the welfare of dogs will want to know that you're prepared for what you're taking on as well. So yeah, that's a really good point. It's not just breeders. Yeah, how many pet owners who've decided to breed their own dog and didn't, with no health checks. Yeah, that's definitely something which.
Absolutely. I mean, we could talk. So for me, you know, we could go on to spaniels if you want here, and kind of talk about how, in actual fact, with spaniels, you've got two breeds within the one breed, which is weird. And I'll explain. You have show, and then you have working. They are not the same dog at all. And you know, with the spaniels, they're breeding for the temperament and the dog's ability to do that job as a working animal. Where there is a show dog, they're breeding for conformation and sound movement. And you get two different personalities, and they look completely different. You compare an English Springer Spaniel show to an English Springer Spaniel working, and the working dog is shorter, squatter, short legs, long body, because they wanted to get them through bracken and things like that. But you then look at the show dog, and it's taller, maybe a little bit thicker set, you know, and different shape of head, longer ears. It's incredible, you know. So it's yeah, I see so many behavioural problems when you've got a mix of a working type spaniel with something else, you know, and that's when you get spaniel elbow, and kind of angular limb deformities in spaniels, and they can't move in a straight line and they go sideways, and because they've been bred for temperament and the job they can do rather than how they look, if that makes sense.
Yeah, spaniels and their elbows is yeah, they tend to have lots of issues with kind of intercondylar fissures and fractured elbows, unfortunately, because of that kind of inherent weakness of the yeah, intercondylar fissures. So it's, yeah, and very commonplace to get arthritis as well in spaniels. But again, like you see, you know, that there are good and bad examples. Just because they're a spaniel doesn't mean they'll get elbow issues, but a lot of them do, sadly.
They do. Jump dance.
Nicola has asked, because we'll probably wind up in sort of 5 or 10 minutes, so we'll try, and now's the time for any last minute questions, guys. But Nicola said, can you speak about how people can find healthy examples of conformation and movement? Because I think we've said a lot of the time, you know, look at good examples of that breed. So where can people find good examples of that breed?
So go to breed standards for a start, and that doesn't necessarily mean the Kennel Club. Okay, so each breed generally has like a group or somewhere you can go to where you can find what breed standards are. And breed standards is basically what they typically would like to see a dog looking like for that breed. They'll go into height, weight, length, ear set, you name it, coat color, feathering, absolutely everything. And they will talk to you about how the dog moves, you know, and this is separate from the Kennel Club. So go and find your breed groups and things like that. You could go to you know, specific breed shows if you are interested in a specific breed of dog. You know, go and sit there, go and spend a day. I from the age of 6, I was, you know, what I thought was torture at the time, I'm now making a living out of it, which is amazing. I went to every single dog show known to man, and I sat there and I watched, and I saw what good movement looked like for the breeds, and I saw what good conformation looked like. And you know, you can speak to judges, you know, and stewards at a ringside have a huge amount of knowledge, and obviously the people showing the dogs as well. And you find some truly lovely people that are willing to share that knowledge with you about the specific breed that they are actually showing and working with. So there's books as well. There's so much. I mean, to be quite honest, I always recommend a book, and there's a video that might go with it as well, and that is Dog Steps, and that's by Rachel Elliott Page, and that is a brilliant book because it talks you through kind of a bit of kind of conformation and a bit of movement, and actually kind of, I mean, she pioneered this stuff kind of like in the 60s. If you see the video, it's very kind of flares and perms and a recorder like Follyfoot, kind of like from the 80s. But it's worth just sitting and looking and going, that's what a dog's supposed to look like. That's what a dog is supposed to move like. Oh, that doesn't look good, because she shows you some not great stuff as well. And then she actually explains how potentially some of the conformation stuff then goes on to affect movement. So there's plenty of things to go out there to find if you just start kind of Googling kind of different things and see what comes up.
So Dog Steps. I've not heard of that one, so I'll have to go and check that out. Oh, cool.
This is the old version. There's like, I think there's like been a third version after this. But yeah, I think it's Dog Steps and New Look is the most current one. But you know, some of the stuff still applies, and it's useful. It will help you to kind of start to understand kind of the mechanics of how a dog is put together and what they should look like.
Yeah. Somebody's said they haven't found breed standards to be very helpful since they tend to be more about tradition and preference, not necessarily geared for ideal health. And I think
exactly, which is why, you know, go to kind of breed shows and things like that and start having a chat with the people that are actually in the breed kind of now sort of thing. You can find lots of stuff.
Yeah, and I think the more that kind of education improves and word gets out there about this kind of extreme breeding and extreme and the impact that that will have on the dog, the more, you know, hopefully, I'm hoping that we might kind of go full circle and go back to kind of less extreme breeding. And you know, if that's your cup of tea to have a less extreme dog, then fine, great. Like, they're out there, and the more that, you know, popularity that those sorts of dogs gain, the more that they will be bred. Yeah. So yeah, it's kind of down to us as consumers of dogs, I suppose, which is a weird way to think of it. But, you know, if you don't want an extreme breed, don't buy one.
No, and I think you know that there's a lot of celebrity focus on extreme breeds as well. I mean, thankfully, the brilliant Jordan Shelley's done a marvelous job of highlighting like the cropped ear dogs and things like that, and that stemmed from kind of like celebrities wanting their dogs to look, you know, harder and things like that. And it's like he's done a brilliant job of educating people, and you know, it's like I said, supply and demand. If we didn't want these dogs, then people wouldn't be there to breed them. So,
yeah, absolutely. Right, we will probably wind things up now because we've been going for just over an hour. So, yeah, thank you very much, Gemma. That's been a really interesting discussion. Do you want to tell the people how they can reach you if they're interested in kind of following what you do?
Yeah, so you can always go to my website, which is dynamicdog.co.uk. I've got a Facebook page of the same name, so Dynamic Dog. We've also got a page for dog owners, which is Dynamic Dog, the Owners Edition. And if you're a pro and you want to know some of the geeky kind of ins and outs of canine conformation and movement to use with your clients, then we have Dynamic Dog, which is a dog trainers and behaviourist toolbox for identifying potential pain, and that's on Facebook as well.
Great, perfect. And yeah, once again, thank you to our sponsor, Big Barker Beds. And just a little plug for CAM as well, so Canine Arthritis Management, about the kind of different resources that you guys can access. So there's things out there for sort of owners and veterinary professionals, if we've got any vets listening in. And yeah, so CAM sort of started off just as a Facebook page, but has now grown into this much bigger thing. There is the CAM member zone, which you can join, and you can get access to all 15 of the CAM downloadable booklets, the OA Bible, and the CAM OA booklet. So loads and loads for you to kind of get your teeth into. And you can access the shop on there. You can get like hoodies, bandanas, all sorts of kind of merchandise and things. And also there are monthly tea and chats with Hannah Capon. The next one is on Monday, the 30th of January. That's basically an opportunity for you guys to kind of drop in and ask any questions that you have. So yeah, feel free to make use of that if there's anything kind of outstanding that you want to ask about your old dogs and their kind of mobility issues. And yeah, follow along. And thank you very much, everyone, for joining in and all your comments, which is very useful for us to sort of talk around. Cool. We will end our broadcast now. Cheers, guys. Thanks, Gemma.